The marshal's hand drifted toward the revolver at his hip. As he stared at the woman standing defiantly before him, her belly round beneath her dress, her chin lifted in challenge. "All of them," she said, unflinching. "This child belongs to all three." 3 men stood behind her, rifles raised, ready to fight and die for the family they had forged. But long before this showdown, before whispers and threats and judgment, there had been a single, terrifying choice. A choice that began on a dusty platform in the middle of nowhere. A stagecoach screeched to a halt, wheels grinding hard against the dry Texas earth. Red dust floated upward, glowing in the late afternoon sun like drifting embers. Eleanor Hawthorne pressed a trembling hand to the window, her heart hammering beneath her travel-worn dress. This was it. The end of a 3-week journey. The beginning of, she didn't know what. She smoothed her skirt, creased, faded, the best she owned, and touched the letter folded carefully in her pocket. The letter that had saved her. The one promising a husband, a home, a fresh start, far from the soot-filled textile mill and her father's crushing debts. Mr. Elias Carter, the man who had written to her, had seemed gentle and steady in his words. He described a ranch, a quiet life, and his desire for a wife who would not be mistreated. Eleanor had memorized every line until the paper threatened to fall apart. The driver swung open the door. "Copper Bend, end o' the line." Eleanor stepped down, clutching her trunk. The town was little more than one dusty street, lined with a saloon, a sheriff's office, a wood-planked general store, and a chapel with a crooked bell tower. And then she saw them. 3 men. Not 1, 3. They stood side by side near the hitching post, hats pulled low, dust coating their boots and shoulders. Each different in build and presence, but all unmistakably connected. The man in the middle stepped forward first. Tall, dark-haired, eyes sharp as obsidian. "Miss Hawthorne," he said, removing his hat. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I'm Elias Carter. These are my brothers, Micah and Reed." Eleanor froze. Brothers? Her throat tightened. The letter had made no mention of brothers, no hint of anything unconventional. Elias saw the confusion flicker in her eyes. He stepped closer, close enough that she smelled saddle leather and pine smoke clinging to him. "I owe you honesty," he said quietly. "The letter came from me. But out here, we worked the ranch together. We lived together. And," his voice dropped lower, "we figured if you came all this way to be a wife, maybe you could be a wife to all 3 of us." The words hit her like a physical blow. Micah, the broad-shouldered blonde brother, softened his gaze. Not asking for a decision, just honesty. "Life is hard out here. What we offer is protection, partnership, shared." Reed, lean and sharp-eyed, spoke last. "We share everything else. We figured if one woman was going to come into this life, she deserved truth right away." Eleanor's cheeks burned hot. Shock, anger, fear. And beneath it all, something strange she couldn't name. Something new, wild, impossible. She had traveled thousands of miles. There was no turning back without help. They knew that. She knew that. But Elias stepped even closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You can get back on that stage tomorrow," he said. "We'll pay your fare home. No judgment. But if you stay, if you give us a chance, I promise you'll never be cold, never hungry, and never alone." The driver cleared his throat impatiently. Her decision hovered in the hot air. Eleanor's hands tightened around her trunk. Her heart pounded. She looked at each brother Elias's intensity, Micah's quiet strength, Reed's watchful intelligence. Then she lifted her chin. "Show me the ranch." Elias's eyes flickered with something like relief. Micah hoisted her trunk with ease, and Reed motioned her toward the waiting wagon. As the horses trotted off the platform, leaving the empty stagecoach behind, Eleanor Hawthorne stepped off the edge of her old life and into a future she could never have imagined. The wagon ride was silent, except for the creak of wood and distant cry of hawks. Eleanor sat stiffly between Elias and Reed, while Micah handled the reins. The air felt thick, not hostile, but heavy with unspoken things. The ranch appeared under the rising moon's sprawling fields, fences stretching into the dark, a barn, corrals, and a sturdy house of timber and stone. "This is home," Elias said. Inside, lanterns filled the rooms with golden light. A large hearth, a wooden table worn by years of work, the scent of smoke, leather, and bread. Elias pointed down a narrow hall. "Last room on the right. Yours. For now." The words caught in her throat. "For now?" He stepped closer again, firelight flickering across his face. "We meant what we said. All three of us want you. But you get to choose. And if the answer's no, you leave with your dignity intact. We won't force your hand." Eleanor searched his eyes for cruelty or dominance. She found only sincerity. She nodded, retreating into the offered room. Her breath shuddered as she shut the door. What life had she stepped into? What woman would she become? Unable to sleep, she stared out the small window at a sky overflowing with stars, more than she'd ever seen in the smoky haze of Boston. Out here, the rules were different. Maybe a woman could rewrite herself. The next morning smelled of frying bacon and fresh coffee. Eleanor stepped into the kitchen and found Micah cooking, his broad back bent over a skillet. "You're thin," he said, placing a heavy plate before her. "Eat." Before she could argue, Elias and Reed entered from outside, faces dusty, shirts damp with morning sweat. They had already been working. Elias leaned against the counter, eyes locked on her. "Sleep well?" She shook her head. "Not exactly." Reed pulled out a chair, studying her closely. "Ask what's on your mind." Her fingers trembled around her fork. "How would this work?" she whispered. "3 men, 1 woman. What am I supposed to be to each of you?" Elias exchanged a glance with his brothers before sitting beside her. "We're not asking you to be 3 wives," he said. "We're asking you to be 1 woman, shared equally." Reed nodded. "No jealousy, no lies." Micah added gently, "Out here, survival means doing what works, not what looks proper." Eleanor swallowed hard. "And if I say no, then you leave," Elias said simply. "With our respect." Her pulse raced. Their offer was unthinkable, scandalous. But their honesty, their certainty, unsettled something deep inside her. "I need time," she whispered. Elias nodded. "You'll have it. But while you think, you work. Everyone does their share here." "I'm not afraid of work." Reed's lips twitched in approval. "Good. Let's see what you're made of." And so Eleanor Hawthorne began her first days on the Carter Ranch days that would test her strength, unravel her fears, and draw her dangerously close to 3 men who refused to let her go. The first week at the Carter Ranch hardened Eleanor's hands, burned her skin, and exhausted her muscles in ways she had never known. By sundown each night, she collapsed into bed, aching and dusty but stronger than the day before. For the first time in her life, she felt her body belonging to her, capable, useful, necessary. Micah taught her the chores of the homestead with a patience she had never experienced from any man. He showed her how to mend harnesses, how to churn butter without overshaking it, and how to patch a torn work shirt with stitches that would not unravel. "You learn fast," he said one morning, wiping sweat from his brow as he repaired a fence post. "Or perhaps people back home never bothered to see what I could do," she replied. Micah paused, meeting her eyes. "Well, we see it." Eleanor looked away, unsettled by the warmth blooming in her chest. Reed's lessons were different, sharper, quieter, full of unspoken meaning. He walked the ranch with her, pointing out signs of coyotes, the direction of the wind, the patterns of the grass that revealed where cattle liked to rest. "Everything leaves a mark," he said. "Most folks never look close enough to see it." "And you do?" Eleanor asked. Reed's gaze swept over her, not inappropriate, but uncomfortably perceptive. "I see more than most," he said softly. She wasn't entirely sure whether he meant the land or her. Elias, however, was the one who unnerved her most. He rarely touched her, but she always felt him near his presence like a storm waiting on the horizon. When she dropped a bucket, he was there. When her grip slipped on a rope, he steadied her before she fell. When she grew frustrated at her own mistakes, his voice came low and firm. "You don't quit. Not out here." And she didn't. Because some part of her wanted Elias Carter's approval more than she could admit. On the 12th day, Eleanor was helping Reed repair the northern pasture fence. It was slow work, the summer heat beating down on them relentlessly. "You're staring," Reed said without looking up. She startled. "What?" "No, I—" He drove a new stake into the ground, with smooth, practiced swings, then turned to her with a faint smile tugging his mouth. "That wasn't a complaint." Her face flushed hot. "I was just watching how you work." "Watching or admiring?" he asked, tilting his head. Eleanor opened and closed her mouth like a trapped fish, mortified. Reed's smile ghosted wider. "Both?" he guessed. She exhaled shakily. "Perhaps." He stood in front of her then, close enough that she smelled leather and the faint, earthy scent of sagebrush. "You keep pretending you don't feel anything," he murmured. Eleanor stiffened. "I do not." Reed reached out gently, brushing his fingers along her wrist. Her pulse jumped violently beneath his touch. "This place gets inside you," he whispered. "We get inside you. You feel it. You're just afraid of what it means." Before she could respond, he stepped away and returned to his tools, leaving her breathless and trembling, and terrified that he was right. By the third week, her guardedness was crumbling. She caught herself laughing at Micah's dry jokes, leaning unconsciously toward Elias when they worked side by side, and searching for Reed's eyes across the table. Each brother offered something different: strength, gentleness, sharp understanding. Together they felt like a force of nature, a force she was being pulled into, piece by piece. One evening, the sky darkened rapidly with thunderclouds. The scent of rain thickened the air. Eleanor was in her room washing her face when the storm hit, wind howling, shutters banging, lightning flashing like the world was splitting apart. Old fear crawled up her throat. Storms had terrified her since childhood. A sudden knock rattled her door. Before she could answer, it swung open, and all three Carter brothers filled the doorway, dripping water, eyes tense. "We're checking the barn," Elias said. "Animals are spooked. But first we needed to see if you were all right." "I'm fine," Eleanor lied, though her voice trembled. Micah stepped closer, his expression softening. "You don't look fine." Reed's eyes narrowed. "You're afraid." The storm roared, thunder cracking so close the floor vibrated. Eleanor swallowed hard. "Yes." Then Elias moved, not with urgency, but with certainty, as if there was no question what he would do. He reached out and cupped her face with his calloused hand. His thumb brushed her cheek, gentle, contradicting the storm outside and the storm inside her chest. "You're safe here," he said. "With us. Always." Something inside her broke. Before she knew what she was doing, she stepped forward, burying her face in Elias's chest. His arms wrapped around her instantly, strong and sure. Micah's warm hand settled on her back, and Reed stood like a solid wall beside them, steadying her with his presence. Thunder shook the walls, but Eleanor didn't flinch. Surrounded by them, she felt safe. For the first time in years, when the brothers finally left to check the barn, Eleanor stood at the doorway, watching them disappear into the rain. Her heart pounded as lightning lit their silhouettes against the storm. And in that moment, she understood. She wasn't afraid of them. She was afraid of how much she already needed them, and how deeply she was beginning to want them. The next morning dawned clear. Eleanor rose early, restless with the memory of Elias's arms around her, Micah's steady hand, Reed's unspoken promise. She went to the kitchen before the brothers returned from their morning chores. She busied herself preparing breakfast biscuits, eggs, coffee, hoping the work would calm her racing thoughts. The door swung open. Elias stepped in first, hair damp from the well, shirt clinging to his chest. He froze when he saw her. "You're up early," he said. "So are you," she replied, refusing to be flustered. He moved closer, eyes scanning her face with that intense focus she had grown used to. "Something's different." She set down the bread knife and met his gaze head on. "I've made my decision." The room went still. Elias's jaw tightened. "Tell me," Eleanor exhaled. her heart galloping. "I'm staying," she whispered. "Not because I must, because I want to." Elias sucked in a shaky breath. Then swift as lightning he crossed the room, cupped her face, and kissed her. Fire exploded through her veins. Her knees weakened. Her hands clutched his shirt. When he pulled away, both of them breathless, Micah and Reed had entered the kitchen, staring. "She's staying," Elias said roughly. Micah smiled, slow, bright, relieved. Reed's eyes glinted with something fiercer. "Good," Reed murmured, "because I don't think any of us were prepared to let you go." Eleanor trembled, not in fear, but in recognition. Her choice had been made. Now she needed to see what it meant. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me the life I'm choosing." And the brothers did exactly that. Eleanor had expected that choosing to stay would bring peace. Instead, it brought something far more unsettling. Belonging. And belonging, she quickly learned, was both a comfort and a responsibility. The morning after her declaration, the Carter brothers guided her through every inch of the ranch, the sprawling fields, the river bend where they watered the cattle, the ridge where the land opened to a breathtaking view of endless horizon. Elias showed her the barns, the tool shed, the storage cellars. Micah explained crop rotations, irrigation, and the small orchard their late father had planted years ago. Reed pointed out the dangers where rattlesnakes liked to hide, where the ground dipped unexpectedly, where a stranger could approach unseen. They did not treat her like a guest anymore. They treated her like the fourth pillar of the ranch. "It's ours," Micah said as they stood on the porch overlooking the golden fields. "Ours now," Elias corrected, voice low. Reed didn't speak, but his fingers brushed hers briefly, so quick it could have been imagined. But Eleanor felt it. She felt all of it. The next weeks unfolded with an intensity she was not prepared for. Elias kissed her like a man who had been holding himself back too long. Micah kissed her like he was memorizing every part of her. Reed kissed her like he was branding himself onto her bones. Each one different. Each one needed. Each one hers. And slowly, Eleanor accepted what the brothers had known from the beginning. She was theirs, and they were hers. Eleanor's confidence grew with the rhythm of ranch life. By the second month, she moved with ease through tasks that had once terrified her. She carried pails, fed chickens, repaired fences, rode horses, even learned to shoot under Reed's careful guidance. "You're a natural," he murmured, after her bullet struck the target's center. "I'm stubborn," she corrected. "That too," he said, a hint of a smirk tugging his lips. They shared a moment, quiet, charged, until Elias's voice cut through the air. "Enough practice for one day." Eleanor glanced at Elias, expecting jealousy. Instead, she found something deeper: protectiveness, bordering on fear. "I won't break," she told him. "No," Elias said, his gaze softening. "But this world might try." For a time, life on the Carter ranch was peaceful, almost too peaceful. Whenever they went into town, people stared. Whispers followed her. "That's the Carter woman. 3 brothers, and only 1 bride? Ungodly. Unnatural." Eleanor held her head high, pretending their curiosity didn't sting. But it did. Worse still, it drew the attention of those who wanted to meddle. The first sign of real trouble came from a man named Silas Granger, a rancher whose land bordered the Carter property on the west. He rode up one morning unannounced, flanked by 2 hired men. His expression was the kind that curdled milk. Elias stepped outside immediately, jaw tight. "State your business," he said. Granger spat tobacco onto the dirt. "Towns talk in Carter. 3 brothers sharing 1 woman makes honest folks uneasy." Eleanor stiffened behind Elias, but he motioned for her to stay inside. Micah and Reed flanked him silently. "This ranch is ours," Elias said. "Who we let on it is our concern." "See, that's where you're wrong," Granger sneered. "A woman living with 3 men ain't proper. Ain't legal neither. Sheriff might like to hear about it." Reed took a half step forward, voice low and cold. "You should leave. Now." Granger narrowed his eyes, shifted in the saddle, then smirked. Just a friendly warning, he said. Judgment's comin'. Sooner or later. He rode off, leaving dust and unease in his wake. Over the next few weeks, the whispers turned sharper. Some townsfolk would not meet Eleanor's eyes. Others met them too boldly, their stares full of judgment or sick curiosity. The preacher at the small chapel gave a sermon about the dangers of falling into sin disguised as companionship. Eleanor stared straight ahead, refusing to let shame touch her. But it was impossible not to feel hollow afterward. One afternoon, Eleanor took the wagon alone into town for flour. She stood at the counter of the general store while Mrs. Pritchard, the storekeeper's wife, filled her order. The woman's eyes flicked to Eleanor's ringless hand. "No wedding band?" she asked. Eleanor lifted her chin. "I wear no lies." Mrs. Pritchard pressed her lips thin. "That's not a marriage, dear. That's a scandal with a roof." Eleanor's chest tightened, heat rising to her face. "I do not need your approval." "No," the woman said sharply. "But the law does." Eleanor turned and left before her temper snapped. Outside, she found Reed already mounting his horse. "You followed me?" she demanded. Reed didn't deny it. "I knew they'd try something." Eleanor opened her mouth to protest but stopped when he placed a hand on her cheek, gentle, steady. "They don't know you," he said softly. "They fear what they don't understand." Her breath hitched. "Do you think this is wrong?" she whispered. Reed brushed his thumb beneath her eye, catching a tear she didn't know had fallen. "I think," he said, voice soft as dust, "that love doesn't care about rules." But whispers turned into accusations, and accusations drew fists. The sheriff arrived days later, a tall man with a thick mustache and a Bible tucked into his coat like a badge. He dismounted on the Carter porch, hand on his gun. "Elias Carter," he called out. "I'm here for answers." Elias walked out slowly, followed by Micah and Reed. Eleanor moved behind them, but the sheriff's gaze locked on her. "You living in sin with these men?" he demanded. Eleanor stepped forward before any of the brothers could answer. "I live by my choice." The sheriff's expression twisted. "Which one of them is the father? Which man claims you?" Eleanor straightened her back, raised her chin. "They all do." The sheriff flinched like she'd struck him. "That's an abomination," he snarled. "And I have full authority to take you in." The brothers' hands moved to their guns. "Try it," Elias said, voice deadly calm. The sheriff paled, realizing the line he had crossed, and the three men who would kill for her. "This isn't over," he spat, retreating to his horse. As he rode away, Eleanor's knees weakened. Elias caught her, steadying her as Micah placed a hand on her back, and Reed scanned the horizon for threats. The fear in their eyes frightened her more than the sheriff had. Something was coming, something they could not stop with bullets and bravery alone. That night, Eleanor could not sleep. She stood on the porch watching lightning flicker far off in the distance, a storm building in the dark. Elias stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Micah rested a hand on her shoulder, Reed on her other side. The four of them, bracing together against an enemy forming beyond the horizon. "They're going to come for us," Eleanor whispered. "All that matters," Elias said softly, "is that we face them together." "Is the Massable?" Eleanor leaned into the three men who had become her world. "Then let them come." The warning signs came in whispers. A broken fence in the south pasture. Boot prints where no Carter brother had walked. Cattle spooked for no reason. Elias saw the danger first. Reed confirmed it. Micah reinforced the perimeter. But Eleanor felt it deepest in the quiet moments, when the wind carried uneasy stillness instead of prairie peace. Something was gathering around them, closing in. The sheriff's visit had been the spark. Now the fire was coming. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Eleanor woke before dawn, nausea sweeping through her like a wave. She barely made it outside before doubling over. Micah found her first, kneeling beside the trough, his face full of worry. "You sick?" he asked softly. I don't know." He touched her shoulder, his large hand trembling. "Eleanor, have you noticed you've been tired more than usual?" Eleanor blinked, her heartbeat stuttering. Her hands drifted to her stomach almost without her permission. "No." Impossible. Or was it? Before she could answer, Elias stepped out of the barn, sensing something was wrong. Reed followed. They approached slowly, as though afraid to frighten her. "Eleanor?" Elias asked. She swallowed hard. "I think I might be—" She couldn't finish. Reed stepped forward, his eyes searching hers. "Are you late?" Eleanor nodded, barely. Micah exhaled shakily. Elias's breath caught. Reed's shoulders sagged with sudden emotion. They all knew. "You're with child," Elias whispered. But before joy could bloom, before smiles could break, shouts tore across the land like a violent tear. Horses, men, guns. Silas Granger had come back this time with a dozen armed riders. Elias grabbed Eleanor and pushed her behind him. Micah and Reed rushed to flank them. Granger and his men dismounted, spreading in a half-circle around the porch. "This ends today," Granger shouted, spit flying. "The sheriff won't act, so we will. No more sin parading as marriage, no more damned mockery of God and the law." Elias stepped forward, rifle steady, jaw clenched. "This is our land," he said. "You're trespassing. We're cleansing what needs cleansing," Granger snarled. "Starting with that woman." He pointed at Eleanor. The child in her belly fluttered fear or instinct. She couldn't know. But Eleanor stepped forward anyway, standing shoulder to shoulder with her husband's. "You won't touch me," she said. "Not while I live." Granger smirked. "We'll see about that." He raised his hand. His men drew guns, and the world held its breath. "Do not fire!" The voice boomed across the ridge. Every head snapped upward. From the tree line behind Granger's gang, riders emerged, dozens of them. The neighboring ranchers, men who had stayed neutral for years, men who owed the Carters debts of labor, water, and honor. At their front was an older rancher, Edwin Harper, respected by all, feared by many. His rifle aimed straight at Granger. "You pick a fight with the Carters," Harper said. "You pick a fight with the whole damn bend." One by one, ranchers took positions behind the Carters, forming a line solid, unmoving, terrifying. Some nodded at Eleanor with quiet respect. Granger's eyes widened. His certainty faltered. "You're all out of your minds," he spat. "You're defending a woman who doesn't even know who her—" "Finish that sentence," Elias growled. "And I'll bury you myself." Reed's finger slid over his rifle trigger. Micah lifted his chin, calm and deadly. Granger's men shifted. Some backed away. Some lowered their guns entirely. Harper narrowed his eyes. "Take your men and go home, Granger, before you drag them to their graves." Granger looked around, saw the odds, saw the resolve in the faces before him. And he broke. "Fine," he shouted. "But when the law comes, you're all accomplices." He mounted his horse and galloped off. His men followed, scattered and shaken. Silence settled over the land. Then, slowly, Harper rode forward. He tipped his hat at Eleanor. "Folks'll talk," he said. "They ain't used to a family like yours." Eleanor met his eyes with steady strength. "We don't need their permission." Harper nodded. "Good, 'cause you won't get it. But you will get respect. You've earned it." He turned to Elias and the brothers. "You fight for your own," he said. "World could use more of that." Then he and the other ranchers rode off, leaving the Carter homestead quiet, safe, whole. Eleanor exhaled shakily, collapsing to her knees. Elias caught her. Micah knelt beside her, Reed placing a steadying hand on her back. "They would have killed us," she breathed. "Yes," Elias murmured, pulling her close. "But they didn't." Micah brushed her hair from her face. "You stood in front of guns for us." Reed's voice broke. "You shouldn't have." Eleanor placed a trembling hand over her belly. "I would do it again." The brothers froze. Elias's eyes widened, a fragile hope breaking across his face. "Eleanor," he whispered. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "We're going to have a baby." Micah let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Reed closed his eyes, overwhelmed. Elias pressed his forehead to hers. "Whose?" Micah began, then stopped ashamed. Eleanor cupped his face. "Ours," she said softly. Just like everything else. And that was that. The months that followed were the hardest Eleanor had ever lived, but also the most beautiful. Her belly grew, her strength wavered, her heart expanded beyond recognition. Elias became fiercely protective, hovering close, steadying her steps, refusing to let her lift anything heavier than a loaf of bread. Micah cooked meal after meal, humming in the kitchen, checking her cravings as though she were royalty. Reed watched her with quiet devotion, sensing fear before she voiced it, rubbing her back when she couldn't sleep, whispering calm truths into her ear when anxiety struck. The ranchers who once whispered began offering help mending fences, leaving baskets of food, pretending they weren't doing it out of newfound respect for the Carter Union. When the labor pains finally came, they came hard and fast. Eleanor screamed. She cursed. She sobbed. And through every moment, the brothers were there. Micah holding her hand, Elias whispering, "You're safe. You're safe." Reed pressing cool cloths to her brow. Hours passed. At dawn, with the sky glowing gold and pink, Eleanor pushed one final time, and the baby's cry filled the room. A boy, red-faced, perfect, furious at having entered the world. Eleanor sobbed as Micah placed the child in her arms. Elias bowed his head and wept openly. Reed kissed the top of her head, tears dripping onto her cheek. "What shall we name him?" Reed asked. Eleanor looked at her son, the miracle she had carried, protected, fought for. "Caleb," she whispered. "Caleb Carter." "Ours," Elias said thickly. "Ours," Micah echoed. "Ours," Reed confirmed. Eleanor closed her eyes, surrounded by the three men she loved and the life they had built together out of courage, defiance, and devotion, against the world's judgment, against the law's blindness, against every odd stacked against them. They had created a family. Not perfect, not conventional, but fiercely, unshakably theirs. And as the sun rose over the Carter Ranch, bathing the land in warm, golden light, Eleanor realized she had found everything she had once thought impossible. A home, a family, a love strong enough to rewrite the rules of the world. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable Western tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider to hype our video to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.